Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going to be looking at something that might surprise you,
Okay.
the humor in the Bible.
Hmm.
We're going to go beyond the, usual ways of looking at these stories and see if we can't uncover some moments that make us laugh and maybe think about these ancient stories in a new way.
Yeah, it's interesting how we often associate the Bible with being serious and solemn.
Right.
But I think when you open yourself to the possibility of laughter,
Yeah.
you often discover like a richness
Yeah.
and the depth that
Yeah.
you might otherwise miss.
Totally. And I mean, we're talking about things like a talking donkey, a prophet throwing some serious shade, somebody falling out of a window during a sermon. These aren't exactly, the first things that come to mind when we think about the Bible.
Right.
But these lighthearted parts might just give us some insights about human nature and the divine and how faith, plays out in our lives.
It's like you're looking at a familiar landscape,
Yeah.
but suddenly you're seeing it with new eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice all these playful details,
Yeah.
these ironic twists, these unexpected punchlines
Exactly.
that maybe you didn't notice before.
So to kick off our journey into biblical humor, let's head over to the book of Numbers and meet Balaam.
Okay.
Now, Balaam is a prophet who's about to get a lesson in humility from, of all things, his own donkey.
Okay.
So the story goes that Balaam is asked to curse the Israelites.
Right.
So he sets off on his trusty steed, totally unaware that an angel is blocking their path.
All right.
And here's where it gets interesting. The donkey, which is like the more spiritually aware of two, sees the angel and tries to, avoid it.
I see.
But Balaam, he's completely blinded by his own ambition. He just gets more and more frustrated.
Right.
And he starts beating the poor donkey.
Oh, no.
Totally missing the divine intervention that's literally right there in front of him.
You can't see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. It's almost like slapstick,
Yeah.
You can picture this prophet yelling at his donkey for trying to save his life.
Right. But then it gets even weirder. The donkey starts talking.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's just so unexpected, and it kind of just injects this pure absurdity into the narrative.
Right.
This simple act of a donkey speaking, I think it forces us to confront, our own limited perceptions.
Yeah.
Like if a donkey can be the one to deliver a divine message,
Right.
what are we missing in our own lives because we're too focused on our own, agendas?
It's true. It really makes you think about how much we miss.
It's a very humbling thought, isn't it?
It is.
That sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, is Balaam's stubbornness kind of a reflection of how we as humans can be?
Uh-huh.
We cling to our desires even when they're leading us down the wrong path.
Absolutely. This story, I think, invites us to really think about how pride and ambition can really cloud our judgment and prevent us from seeing the signs that are all around us.
The signs from God.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's move on to another prophet who was great at the dramatic,
Okay.
but maybe his humor is a little more on the sarcastic side.
Right.
We're talking about Elijah
Mm-hmm.
and his, fiery showdown with the prophets of Baal.
All right.
Now, for those who might not know, Baal was another god
Right.
that a lot of people worshipped at the time.
Uh-huh.
And Elijah is determined to show everybody that the God of Israel is the only true God.
The one true God.
So picture this. It's a big dramatic contest
Okay.
to see whose God can send fire from heaven.
Wow.
The prophets of Baal, they're dancing, they're chanting, they're even cutting themselves to try to get their God's attention.
Wow.
But
Nothing's happening.
and then Elijah steps in and throws out this line with a perfect blend of wit and sarcasm.
Oh.
He says, "Shout louder." Maybe he's deep in thought or busy or traveling or sleeping. You'll have to wake him up.
Oh, my God.
You can almost hear the crowd laughing.
Yeah.
It's such a smart and clever way to criticize idol worship. It's like he's saying, look how silly it is to pray to a God who seems to be, a little preoccupied.
It's a brilliant use of satire
Yeah.
to really expose the emptiness
Yeah.
of misplaced faith.
Exactly. He's not just making fun of these prophets.
Right.
He's questioning the whole idea of worshiping a God who seems distant and unresponsive.
Totally.
And it makes you wonder if maybe we're also guilty of this sometimes, Are the things we do for our faith really meaningful?
Right.
Or are we just going through the motions hoping for some response from a God who may not even be listening?
It's a question we all have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it really makes you think. So from the sharp wit of Elijah, Let's move on to a prophet who's known more for his sulking than his sense of humor.
Yeah.
Jonah. Jonah often gets a bad rap for being grumpy. But if you look at his story in a funny way, it actually has a deep lesson about compassion.
Interesting.
Jonah doesn't want to preach to the Ninevites.
Right.
He gets mad when they repent and avoid God's anger, and he completely overreacts when a plant dies. It's all very human. Like, we all get frustrated when things don't go our way.
Right.
But what's fascinating about this story is how God uses humor and a wilting plant to teach Jonah. And there's a big lesson about grace.
I see.
Jonah's sulking is so over the top that it's almost comical.
Yeah.
And through this funny portrayal of human pettiness, this story shows us how powerful forgiveness can be.
Right.
God's like, hey, Jonah, you're more worried about a plant than all these people in Nineveh.
Wow.
And that shows us how deep God's compassion is, even for those who maybe don't deserve it. It's a good reminder that even when we're being childish and stubborn, God still loves us and wants the best for us.
That's true.
Sometimes it takes a little humor, a little bit of the absurd to shake us out of our own little worlds and open our hearts to something bigger.
So true. Jonah's story, even though it's often seen as about disobedience,
can
also be seen as a funny exploration of how flawed we are as humans and how boundless God's grace is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so from sulking prophets to like death-defying preachers.
All right.
Our next story is both kind of dark and funny and also inspiring.
Okay.
It's about Paul, the apostle, who just wouldn't stop preaching.
Wow.
Even when something unexpected happened.
Okay.
So this is the story of Eutychus, a young man who made the mistake of dozing off during one of Paul's really long sermons.
During a sermon?
Yeah. I mean, we've all been bored in a lecture before, right?
Right.
But poor Eutychus was sitting in a third-story window. And yeah, you guessed it. He took a tumble.
Oh, no.
Now, the story gets sad because Eutychus doesn't make it.
Oh, gosh.
But then Paul does something amazing. He goes down and revives Eutychus.
He revives him.
And then he just picks up right where he left off with the sermon.
What?
It's crazy, right?
That's wild.
You've got this sudden tragedy, then this miracle, and then the sermon just continues as if nothing happened.
Like nothing happened.
It is kind of dark humor.
Yeah.
But what really stands out to me is Paul's focus.
Right.
It's like nothing can stop him from sharing his message.
Wow.
Not even death.
It makes you think about dedication.
Yeah.
And what we're willing to do for our own callings.
Totally. And it also makes you think about how we handle the unexpected things that happen in our own lives.
Like those curveballs.
Do we let them stop us in our tracks?
Yeah.
Or do we find a way to keep going even if it means, you know, reviving a fallen listener and carrying on with what we were doing?
It's a good question.
Okay, so let's switch gears from drama to something totally absurd.
Okay.
This story has a family feud, a blessing, and a really questionable disguise.
Right.
We're talking about Jacob, his brother Esau,
and
a lot of goat hair.
Goat hair?
When you think about it, this story is just plain funny.
Right.
Isaac, Jacob's father, is getting old, and he wants to give his blessing to his oldest son, Esau.
Right.
Now, Esau is known for being super hairy.
Okay.
But Rebecca, Jacob's mother, likes Jacob better.
Right.
So she comes up with this plan to trick Isaac.
Oh.
And this is where it gets really funny.
Okay.
Rebecca covers Jacob's arms in goat hair.
Goat hair.
Trying to make Isaac think that he's actually Esau?
Wow.
I mean, how hairy was Esau? That goat hair was even close.
Right.
Just picture it. It's hilarious.
It's a funny image.
But beyond the funny image, the story shows us how far people will go to get what they want.
Right.
Even if it means doing something completely ridiculous.
They'll go to any length.
Yeah, it reminds us that families can be messy. And sometimes our desires lead us down some pretty funny paths.
So true. It also makes you think about deception.
Yeah.
And whether it really works out in the end.
Right. Did Jacob's trick actually help him?
Yeah.
Or did it just cause more problems down the road?
It's a good question, especially when you consider the whole story and the rivalry between Jacob and Esau.
Yeah, this funny incident actually sets off a whole chain of events that affect their families for generations.
It's amazing how these stories connect.
So from family drama to divine intervention, our next story takes us to a wedding that's about to run out of drinks.
Uh-oh.
We're talking about Jesus turning water into wine.
At the wedding at Cana.
Yes, one of his first miracles,
Right.
and one that has a little bit of mischief in it.
Interesting.
So the wedding party is in full swing,
Okay.
but they've run out of wine.
Oh, no.
Which is a big no-no.
Yeah.
It could ruin the whole celebration.
Right.
But Mary, Jesus' mother, sees the problem,
Uh-huh.
and she knows her son can fix it.
Of course.
Now, here's the interesting part.
Okay.
Instead of making a big deal out of it,
Yeah.
Jesus quietly tells the servants to fill some jars with water.
With water.
And then he turns that water into the best wine
Wow.
the banquet master has ever tasted.
That's amazing.
But the best part is nobody except the servants and Mary seems to notice what just happened.
They have no idea.
The banquet master even praises the groom for saving the best wine for last.
Wow.
Completely unaware of the miracle.
That's hilarious.
It's like Jesus pulled off a big prank with his mom in on it.
Right.
It adds this layer of humor to the miracle, and it shows us a playful side of Jesus.
Or his side we don't always see.
It makes you wonder if Jesus is doing this on purpose, like working behind the scenes to make this miracle happen quietly.
Uh-huh.
It reminds us that God's grace often works in mysterious ways,
Yeah.
bringing joy and abundance into our lives when we least expect it.
Yeah.
Okay, get ready for this next story.
Okay.
It has some really strange instructions
Right.
and a prophet who takes divine commands to a whole new level.
Okay.
We're talking about Ezekiel, the prophet turned performance artist.
Interesting.
This one makes you wonder if God has a sense of humor. He tells Ezekiel to do all these weird and seemingly pointless things.
Like what?
Lie on your side for hundreds of days.
What?
Cook bread over a fire fueled by human dung.
Oh, my.
Shave your head.
Ugh.
Divide the hair into 3 parts. Burn some, scatter some, and stab some with a sword.
That's intense.
Imagine being Ezekiel's neighbor.
I can't even imagine.
It's like God saying, Ezekiel, I need you to really get into this prophecy.
Wow.
Go big or go home.
Go big or go home.
These actions are so absurd.
Yeah.
That's what makes them funny.
Right.
But there's also a deeper meaning.
Okay.
These bizarre things are supposed to be symbolic, to grab people's attention and show them how serious the situation is. It's like God's using humor and shock value and a bit of theater to get his message across.
Yes, to make sure people remember.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if sometimes the best way to communicate is to do something completely unexpected.
Yeah, break the mold.
Because who would forget a prophet cooking bread over dung?
Nobody.
Okay, from prophets doing strange things to apostles staying calm in the middle of chaos.
All right.
Our next story takes us to a shipwreck.
Okay.
Where Paul once again shows us how to stay cool under pressure.
Cool under pressure.
So picture this. There was a huge storm, a ship being tossed around.
Oh, no.
And everyone on board is terrified.
Of course.
But right in the middle of this chaos, Paul steps forward and says something totally unexpected.
What's that?
He tells everyone to eat.
To eat.
I know, right? They haven't eaten in 2 weeks.
Wow.
They're in serious danger. And Paul's like, hey, guys, maybe we should grab some food.
That's wild.
And don't forget to thank God while you're at it.
It's the most dad thing I've ever heard.
It really is. The humor comes from how calm Paul is
Right.
compared to how scary the situation is.
Yeah.
But it also shows us how strong his faith is,
Right.
that he can find peace and even humor in a storm.
It reminds us that how we see things shapes our reality.
Totally. Even when everything's falling apart.
Yeah.
We can choose to focus on the good, find things to be thankful for, and hold on to our sense of humor.
Even when it seems impossible.
Even if it seems a little out of place.
Paul's faith is so inspiring.
Yeah.
He finds peace in the middle of chaos.
Right.
It's a powerful example of how what's going on inside of us can change what happens outside of us.
Yeah. Even when faced with a shipwreck, we can choose to trust in something bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
And find those moments of grace.
And humor.
Okay, I've got another story about a prophet who needs a little extra reassurance.
Okay.
A little extra proof that he's on the right track.
Right.
We're talking about Gideon, the king of double-checking,
Okay.
and his fleece test.
The fleece test.
God has chosen Gideon to lead the Israelites.
Right.
But Gideon's not so sure about it, so he asks for a sign.
A sign?
A very specific sign involving a fleece and some dew.
A fleece and dew.
He says, if the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground around it is dry, then I'll know I'm hearing you. And God, being patient, says, sure, Gideon, whatever you need.
He's accommodating.
And of course, the next morning, the fleece is wet and the ground is dry.
Wow.
But Gideon's still not totally convinced. Asks for another sign.
He does.
This time the opposite. A dry fleece and a wet ground.
He really needs to be sure.
Gideon wanting to be sure is so relatable.
Yeah.
We've all had times when we needed a little extra confirmation that we're doing the right thing. But what's funny is Gideon insisting on double checking.
Yeah.
Like he needs to see God's power in a very specific way.
It's like he's saying, okay, God, I believe you, but just to be extra sure, can you do that thing again?
Exactly.
But the opposite.
And God, being infinitely patient, delivers again.
He delivers.
It's a good reminder that it's okay to have doubts, to ask questions, and to need a little extra help sometimes.
Yeah, and it shows us that God is willing to meet us where we are and give us what we need.
Even if it seems a little unnecessary.
Even if it seems a little much.
Okay, so next up we have a story that's straight out of a cartoon.
Okay.
A story that's almost too unbelievable.
All right.
And it adds a bit of visual humor to the Bible.
I like it.
We're talking about the Israelites and their giant grape cluster.
A giant grape cluster.
These guys are checking out the promised land.
Right.
And they come back with a souvenir that's, well, a little oversized.
Oversized how?
We're talking about a grape cluster so big that it takes 2 men to carry it on a pole.
Oh, wow.
You can just imagine it, right?
I'm picturing it.
These grapes bouncing down the road. The Israelites struggling under the weight of this giant fruit.
It's a funny image.
It's totally exaggerated, and that's what makes it funny.
Right.
But it also has a purpose.
Okay.
It shows how abundant the promised land is.
Right, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Exactly, a land so fertile that even the grapes are huge.
Wow.
It reminds us that God's blessings can be so much bigger than we can even imagine.
And it's a reminder that even in the Bible, there's room for playfulness.
Right.
For exaggeration.
Yeah.
For moments that make us smile.
Yeah, exactly. The Bible isn't just a bunch of rules and teachings.
Right.
It's also a story filled with wonder and surprise. And moments that are just plain fun.
I love that.
Speaking of wonder and surprise.
Okay.
Our last story for this part of our deep dive is so wonderfully absurd and so delightfully convenient that you can't help but laugh.
I'm ready.
We're talking about Peter paying the temple tax with a fish's mouth.
With a fish's mouth.
Even in biblical times, it was tax season.
Right.
And Peter and Jesus are asked to pay the temple tax.
Okay.
But instead of reaching for his wallet, Jesus tells Peter to go fishing.
Go fish.
He says, the first fish you catch will have a coin in its mouth.
What?
Use that to pay the tax.
That's incredible.
I know, right?
It's like something out of a movie.
It's so funny and also really meaningful. The convenience of it all is what makes it so hilarious.
Yeah.
But it also shows us Jesus's playful side. His ability to do things in unexpected ways.
Right.
And his willingness to take care of his followers.
Yeah.
Even in the craziest situations.
Even when it seems impossible.
It reminds us that God's grace can be found in the most ordinary things.
Yeah.
Even paying taxes.
Wow. And sometimes the solutions to our problems come from the most unexpected places.
Exactly. So keep an eye out for those fish with coins in their mouths.
I will.
You never know when they might come in handy.
That's right. And as we continue to look at the humor in the Bible, remember that laughter isn't just about having fun.
Right.
It's about being open to new ways of seeing things.
Yeah.
To deeper meanings.
Right.
And to the idea that even sacred texts can make us smile.
We'll be back after a short break.
Okay.
To explore what these funny stories tell us about human nature.
Right.
About God. And about the role of laughter in our spiritual lives.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the surprisingly funny side of the Bible. It's amazing how even after centuries of study and interpretation, these old texts can still make us laugh and think, and maybe even see our own beliefs in a new way.
It really shows you how powerful these stories are.
Yeah.
And how complex God is.
As we've been going through these stories, I've noticed that the humor isn't just random. It seems intentional.
Yeah.
Like it's built into the stories to highlight important themes.
Right.
And show us human flaws and even give us glimpses of God's personality.
It's like a hidden message.
Yeah.
Encouraging us to look deeper and have fun with these stories.
Exactly. Think about all the different types of humor we've seen.
Yeah.
From Balaam arguing with his donkey to Elijah making fun of the prophets of Baal.
Right.
To Jonah's ridiculous temper tantrum.
And the visuals, too.
Oh, yeah.
The Israelites carrying that giant grape cluster. Ezekiel doing all those weird things.
Right.
Peter finding money in a fish's mouth.
It's like a biblical comedy show.
I love it.
Spanning centuries.
And using all sorts of comedy.
But these funny moments aren't just for laughs.
Right.
They make us look at our own flaws and question our motivations and biases.
And remind us not to take ourselves too seriously.
Exactly. It's like the Bible saying, look, you're not so different from these characters. You make mistakes, you have pride, you get insecure.
Right.
But it's okay because even when you're imperfect, there's grace and there's humor.
It's a good message.
It is. It reminds us that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Learning and growing and hopefully laughing along the way.
One thing that keeps coming up is perspective.
Oh, yeah.
So many of these stories show how our limited view can lead us to bad decisions, missed opportunities, and even resisting what God wants.
Think about Balaam.
Yeah.
He's so focused on cursing the Israelites that he doesn't even see the angel in front of him.
Right. Or Jonah.
Yeah.
Who's so caught up in his own idea of justice that he can't understand God's compassion for Nineveh.
And Gideon, even though God chose him to lead, he needs 2 fleece tests to believe it.
It's like we're all wearing blinders sometimes.
Yeah.
Missing the bigger picture.
And that's where humor comes in. It can shake us out of those limited perspectives, help us see the irony.
Yeah.
And realize how silly it is to hold on to our limited understanding.
It's like God saying, lighten up.
Right.
Look at things from a different angle. You might be surprised by what you find.
And those discoveries can make us more compassionate for ourselves and for others.
We can laugh at our own mistakes.
We don't judge other people as much.
Right. And when we can find humor in tough situations, we can handle them better.
Like they say, laughter is the best medicine.
But in these Bible stories, it's more than just medicine. It helps us grow spiritually.
It helps us let go of our ego.
Right.
Be more humble. And open ourselves to God's grace.
Jonah's story is a great example of this.
Totally.
It shows how humor can teach us about compassion.
Yeah, Jonah is so against what God wants. He wants those people in Nineveh to be punished.
Right.
And he ends up sulking under a wilting plant.
Really?
Complaining about how unfair it all is.
He's so focused on himself.
It's hilarious and also kind of sad.
Yeah.
But God's response is perfect.
Okay.
He doesn't yell at Jonah.
Right.
He uses humor and irony to show Jonah how ridiculous he's being.
God's like, you care more about a plant.
Yeah.
Than about all those people.
It's a funny moment.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think, right, are we holding on to anger or resentment? Are we being stingy with our compassion?
Jonah's story isn't just about disobedience. Right. It's a funny way of exploring how we make mistakes. And how much God loves us.
It reminds us that even when we resist, even when we think we're right,
God still loves us.
And wants to forgive us.
And times we need a little humor.
Yeah.
A little divine intervention.
Help us see the bigger picture.
To open our hearts to love and forgiveness.
You know, as we've been looking at these funny parts of the Bible, I've been thinking about how it changes our understanding of the Bible and of God.
It does when we can see the humor.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
We usually approach the Bible with a lot of respect and seriousness.
Of course.
Which is important, but sometimes that makes us miss the subtle things, the lighter moments.
The fun parts.
We get so focused on the rules and the history.
Yeah.
That we forget that these were written by real people.
Right.
People who laughed and cried and felt all kinds of emotions. And those emotions are in the stories.
Exactly when we laugh at the talking donkey.
Yeah.
Or the fish with the coin.
We're connecting with the human side of the Bible.
We're saying this is a holy book.
Yeah.
But it's also a human story.
Story about our experiences.
Our joys and sorrow.
Our triumphs and failures.
And when we embrace that human side, we connect with these stories in a deeper way.
We find meaning and inspiration in unexpected places.
It reminds us that faith and humor can go together.
They can make each other better.
And create a richer spiritual experience.
Because laughter helps us understand.
Yeah.
It connects us to something bigger.
It bridges the gap between the old and the new.
Yeah.
The sacred in the everyday.
It reminds us that our relationship with God doesn't have to be serious all the time. It can be playful.
It can be light.
It can even be laugh out loud funny.
And when we can laugh with God, when we see the humor in our lives,
we're connecting with something deeper.
Something that goes beyond what we can understand.
It's like we're seeing the cosmic joke.
The divine playfulness.
That's all around us.
And in those moments of laughter, we remember that we're part of something much bigger.
Something amazing and funny at the same time.
So as we go into the last part of our deep dive, let's hold on to this sense of wonder, this openness to the unexpected. This willingness to embrace the humor in our faith.
Because in those moments of laughter, we might find a deeper truth.
A stronger connection.
And a renewed sense of joy.
In our spiritual journey. It's amazing how when you open yourself up to it, you see this whole new layer of playfulness and wit.
It makes you see these stories in a new light.
It does.
Less like rules and more like stories about real people.
Right. People who laughed and cried and messed up.
And it's those funny parts that can lead to some pretty deep insights.
They make you question things and see your own flaws.
Yeah.
And think about your relationship with God in a new way.
One of the biggest lessons for me is that it's okay not to take ourselves too seriously.
We all have our Balaam moments where we're so focused on something that we miss what's right in front of us.
Like his donkey trying to tell him something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be more like the donkey.
Maybe we should...
A little more humble.
A little less stubborn.
It's when we can laugh at ourselves.
That
we can really grow.
That's when grace comes in.
Grace and humor go hand in hand.
Even when we're messing up.
There's still room for laughter.
And we can't forget about perspective.
Oh yeah, that keeps coming up.
So many of these stories
show us how our limited view
can really mess things up.
Jonah sulking about the plan.
While ignoring the people of Nineveh.
Gideon needing 2 fleece tests.
When God already told him what was up.
We get stuck in our own little world.
And miss the bigger picture.
Humor can help us break free.
It shakes us up.
Makes us see the irony.
And realize we don't know everything.
It's like God's way of saying,
lighten up.
Be open to new ideas.
There's more to it than you think.
And that story about Paul and the shipwreck?
That's a good one.
Chaos everywhere.
The ship is sinking.
And Paul's just like,
everyone stay calm and eat.
Don't forget to thank God for the food.
It's amazing.
It shows that even when things are falling apart,
you can still find peace,
gratitude, and even humor.
It's all about perspective.
Choosing faith over fear.
Finding something to be thankful for.
And maybe a little laughter to help us through.
So as we wrap up our look at humor in the Bible, let's hold on to these lessons.
Don't take ourselves too seriously.
Embrace the laughter.
Be open to the absurd.
Remember that faith can be joyful.
Full of wonder.
And even laugh out loud funny.
Because when we laugh with God,
we connect with something bigger than ourselves.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the lighter side of the Bible.
And that you'll keep finding humor and inspiration in these amazing stories.
Until next time, may your days be filled with laughter.
And may your heart be light.